Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, Michael people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits, pumped for another fun-filled, rapid-fire, adventurous trip throughout the sports map, sharing the latest and greatest with your favorite little podcast host, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard, and for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now that we're just one episode away from an illustrious 500 and even 500, a great milestone that I'm certainly looking forward to, I figured I'd just set the stage as we head into the penultimate weekend of the baseball season, and we could scratch off another race. As I talked about weeks ago, thinking that once we get past September 15th, and here we are on the 19th of the month, where I thought there wasn't going to be much to chew on, maybe a little bit of the wild card where the Mets, my beloved baseball team growing up since I was 4 years old, how now they're just even that much closer to clinching a playoff berth. But hey, got to pump the brakes. We still have plenty of games to go. But the other race of note is sayonara, is bye-bye, where the Yankees won in Seattle last night in a crazy play by Julio Rodriguez, which I'll get to. But the Baltimore Orioles, they're the big story right now in baseball, as now you can forget about the AL East. You can forget about them trying to contend with the Yankees, even with 3 games at Yankee Stadium, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. They're going to need a miracle to get to the Bronx, whether they be 2 back, 1 back, or even dead even. And right now it's looking like it could be a scenario where they are going to be put out the pasture as far as trying to stake their claim for another division title, which they did last year in the AL East. But where's it all gone? This was a team into the All-Star break. They were flying high, doing well. They came out of the All-Star break a little stumbling, bumbling, fumbling, losing the series to the Marlins down in Miami, which was pretty much the precursor of what we've seen here throughout the course of the summer. And now they are just trying to pick up the pieces. They're trying to regroup, play some consistent baseball heading into October, because we know that they're going to be a part of the playoffs. There's no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. And they can lose the rest of their games, and I still think they clinch. But obviously that's way extreme if you're an Oriole fan or a backer of this team. But when we look at what has happened here, whether it's their offense sputtering, not showing the same prowess that they did in the first half. I know they've had some injuries here. Adley Rutschman hasn't been the same since July, or even a guy like Gunnar Henderson, who, for whatever MVP candidacy that you could look at with the young upstart shortstop, that you could pretty much forget about. It's a 2-man race between Aaron Judge and Bobby Witt, and we would think that Judge, when it's all said and done, is going to win the AL MVP. But whether you have guys like that, even Anthony Santander, who's been pretty consistent and has pretty much carried this team, but again, they have not been able to put up those offensive numbers that we've seen over the course of the first 2/3 of the season, to where now they're sputtering. Now they've sprung leaks, and now they're just gasping for air, just hoping that they could at least get some sort of consistency, some sort of good play heading into October, because as we saw last year, even when everything was clicking, 101 wins, winning the division, and they got swept by the Texas Rangers in the division series. So maybe this could be a reversal of fortune. May I even look at it from that regard? Now, we'll have to wait till we get to a week from this coming Tuesday to assess what's going to happen with the wild card, because that's where the Orioles are headed. But between their lineup not having a semblance of what we've seen throughout the course of the year, and on top of that, their pitching rotation, I don't want to say it's in shambles, but when you have Grayson Rodriguez, the number 2 starter, who's been out, and who knows what his status is going to be moving forward. I don't have a latest and greatest when it comes to if he's going to at least have a start or 2 under his belt before we get to the wild card round. That remains to be seen. We know it's going to be anchored by Corbin Burns at the top. You have Zach Eflin, who's been actually pretty good since the trade there right before the deadline at the end of July. But Eflin, he's a guy that you could certainly smack around. He's not a guy that's going to miss bats. He has to hit his spots. He's not going to blow away people with 98, 99 on the gun. And then you have Dean Kramer, who's a good starter, good number 3 guy, but you're piecemealing this together if you're the Orioles, knowing that I don't want to say you're on life support, but considering where you were, even just as early as 2 weeks ago, where you were neck and neck with the Yankees, a game back, half game up, and now it has just gone into smithereens to where you're now 5 games back. And now as you're trying to look ahead to see what you could do to build to get to the end of this month and into October, do you have any confidence, if you're an Orioles fan, to think that they're going to get out of this muck, out of this mire, and just try to get back to a semblance of what we've seen in April, May, June, and the early part of July? I don't know. The team is young. The team is, we know what its identity is with their young players, a la Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman, and you want to throw in Jackson Holliday. I understand it may be too much to ask from the young rookie, but still, he's going to be a part of this fabric for many years to come. So this is good for him to get this experience, to get this feeling of trying to get out of these doldrums and try to break the snides, so to speak, in order for them to get back to where they were one of the dominant teams in the American League for the first half plus of the season. But now with that, and then also with Craig Kimbrell, their closer who they brought in for $13 million 1 year, who they DFA'd, and he's just been a wreck. Granted that he's had some sliver of moments, but they can't even rely and trust him to close out games based on what you saw there the other day where he got lit up for, 6 runs and I believe a third of an inning or whatever it was. He maybe completed the inning, but he was just god-awful. And now this Oriole team is staring at October, thinking about where they're going to go, what is going to happen, what Baltimore Oriole team is going to show up. And they still have some competitive games forthcoming because they have the Tigers this weekend, which is going to be a fascinating series, and I'll get to the Tigers in a moment. And then after that, they have the Yankees at Yankee Stadium to see where they stack and measure up against them deep in this baseball season, because who knows, they may even face them in the division series if they do get past the wild card. So it's all right in front of them. And yes, we could say, even if they were playing the dregs of the American League, that they still have, 9, 10, 11 games left to where they could kind of regroup and get themselves back on the beam to close out strong and then at least head into October with some momentum. But I don't know which Oriole team you're going to get. And I thought the Orioles, I picked them as a World Series finalist to go along with the Phillies. But right now, how could you even have any confidence thinking that this team is going to get past the wild card round, let alone face the Yankees in a division series where you could say, all right, best of 5. I don't think the Orioles fear the Yankees in that regard. Although that the Yankees have pounded the Orioles over the years, other than the second half of last year because they were very competitive. And then obviously this year, the Orioles have a 6-4 season series advantage. So I don't think there's going to be any type of fearfulness or for them to be fearful of this Yankee team if they do meet in October or even next week for that matter. But you really have to scratch your head and wonder whether or not they're going to be long for October to begin with. And I don't know. Right now, let me get a better feel and sense after the season is over. And as we all know, sometimes with the flick of a switch, when we think, the Orioles are going to be left for dead, next thing you know, they'll win a wild card round, and here they are, up 2-1 against the Yankees, where they could put the hammer on them and go to a championship series. That's how these Octobers work. It's weird. I get it that anything could happen, anything could go, and you could just roll the dice. But based on what I've seen with this Oriole team, back of the bullpen, their lineup, and their starting rotation, I don't even know if they're going to make it out of the wild card series alive. And as it is right now, they would face the Kansas City Royals in the first round, where the Royals, I know they've been slacking off a little bit. They haven't been playing up to snuff. The Tigers have done a number on them just recently, and now who knows if the Royals are kind of facing their own, I don't want to say mortality, because it is the regular season. We're not into October just yet, but maybe there's some question marks surrounding them as they get into the latter part of this month and knowing that the playoffs are on the horizon to where maybe their confidence is a little bit shattered at the moment. So it's going to be very intriguing October. And just to kind of paint a big portrait of the playoffs, and I get it, we have to wait till every team is set and have clinched, etc. But I think this postseason is going to be wide open. Now, I know the Yankees are playing well, and we would think the Yankees are going to be the favorite coming out of the American League, and maybe even the same for the Phillies. But as we've seen in years past, and I could see this upcoming October being the same, it's going to be wildly and highly unpredictable. And that's the beauty of the playoffs when you get to October. It's not the NBA or NHL where you got to wait 2 months to crown a champion, or even the NFL where it does start in the middle of January, but then you have those 2 weeks off before the Super Bowl, and we all know the Super Bowl is a big, giant event. And obviously with football, you have to wait Monday through Friday to get to Saturday and Sunday in order to watch these games. Where baseball, it's at a breakneck speed. Right after the regular season, you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with the wild card. Then into the weekend, you have the division series. Before you know it, it's a championship series. And then you have your fall classic. So I think it's going to be fascinating to say the least. And whether or not the Orioles are going to show up, that's something I'm going to be on top of. And as far as the Tigers go, what a ride that they've been on. Think about this. 1 month ago to the day, August 19th, do you know that this team was 9 games back of both the Royals and Twins in the division? Forget about wild cards and things of that nature, even though, of course, they were part of the wild card mix. They were 9 games back a month ago. And now they're just a half game. They're just a twin loss in Cleveland this afternoon, or whenever you listen to this, because maybe by the time you listen to this, the game may be in progress or long over. But if the Twins lose today, they will be in a flat-footed tie for the 6th spot in the AL wildcard. And the Tigers, what more can you say about this team? And I talked about this last Thursday and even a little bit on Monday when we talked about their roster, and they don't have a plethora of stars, or let alone one mega star that you could rally around or, of course, wrap your arms around. Riley Green is your guy that is your offensive firepower when you talk about their lineup. Now, of course, they do have a Cy Young candidate in a one Tarek Skubal. That he is going to probably be, when it's all said and done, the AL Cy Young Award winner for 2024. But other than that, you don't have a lockdown bullpen, although you have a pretty good bullpen, but nothing along the likes of, all right, once you get past the starters, you got 4 innings of just heat and more heat and just lockdown bullpen from 6 to 9 when it comes to those innings. So you have to give it up for what A.J. Hinch has done. I know I've already sung his praises here over the last week or so. But now, is this more of a twin, or as to say, a Tiger uprising, or a twin just meltdown? Because the Twins, who have lost 2 out of 3 in Cleveland, and they see if they're going to split this series before heading to Boston over the weekend. And the Twins, granted they've had their injuries. I know Carlos Correa's been out, and Byron Buxton, I know he's been back in the lineup now. And it's not as if they have a fearsome foursome in their rotation, to say the least. They have a very good bullpen, but here's the Twins, where a lot of people thought they were going to have a down year. A lot of people thought, even though they made the postseason last year, they were going to be a team that maybe with Cleveland or even Kansas City, they were going to overtake the division and Minnesota would have been long gone. And here they are. They are a team that is literally gasping for air. And all the pressure is on them to win this game, to at least have a game lead going into the weekend, to where, like I mentioned, the Tigers are going to go to Baltimore, where Minnesota is going to have to go to Boston. And we'll see where the chips fall come Monday. But the Twins, they're just trying to do whatever it takes to just keep their head above water, to just get to the finish line. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do so based on their play. And the Tigers just been roaring and scorching hot. And I'll take a look at the schedules, I promise. I know I've been saying that the last couple of pods, and next thing you know, I'm skipping to the football. But it has just been a gauntlet for Minnesota just to try to get through. Not to say that they played top teams. I mean, obviously the Guardians are one of the top teams in the AL when you think about it, and of course have the first place lead in the division. But let's see if the Twins are going to be able to hang on and survive, or the Tigers just going to overtake them and have this magic carpet ride to a postseason that, who knows? When you get to October, as we all know, anything could happen. So that's what I have with the American League picture when you think about it, because when we look at the wild cards, that's where it's going to be at. It's going to be Baltimore, we already know they're going to be entrenched in the 4. Kansas City, they're currently a game ahead, and that's where the Twins will make up that game today in Cleveland. Game and a loss, but a game and a half in the division. And then you have the Tigers just a half game behind Minnesota, who could come to a deadlock-even tie with a Twin loss today. And with the Tigers, with a day off, traveling to Baltimore, that's where the schedule will pick up tomorrow, and we'll see where the final 9 games will end up. Then you have Seattle, who have just fallen apart here. Now, they are 3 games behind the Twins, and we would think that with just their recent play that they're not going to have a shot. Forget about the Red Sox, although they played the Twins for 4. And the only reason why I say forget about the Red Sox is because we would think they're not going to sweep the Twins, no matter how much of a free fall that Minnesota's in it at this current moment. But at least they do have that. But here's the problem. The reason why I say the Red Sox are probably not going to make it is because they still have to leapfrog both Detroit and Seattle in the process. So yes, they could sweep the Twins and maybe even come close to a game back of the Twins when we get to Monday. But what are the Tigers and what are the Mariners going to do? Are they all of a sudden going to hit an abutment and start a losing streak in their own right? Chances are it's probably not the case. Maybe more so Seattle because they've been erratic as opposed to the Tigers, as we all know. We've talked about how well they played here. So that's why I don't think that the Red Sox are going to make any hay. I think this is going to be 3, or really in this case, 2 for 1. And that's either Tigers, Twins to win that final AL wildcard spot. And then the National League, we know about the divisions. They're already set where you're going to have the Brewers who are already clinched. The Phillies, who could probably clinch this weekend, depending on what happens here with the Mets. I don't expect the Mets to sweep them as the Phillies come to town for 4 starting tonight. But I'm sure they're going to clinch at some point here between now and maybe Monday. And then you have the Dodgers, who have a comfortable lead over both the Padres and Diamondbacks. But now what it boils down to, the wild card race. I'll start with the Mets. They are currently the 5th seed in the wild card race, to where if the season ended today, they would play the San Diego Padres. And quite honestly, and not to put the cart before the horse, it doesn't matter who the Mets play. They could stay in Milwaukee, get a 6th seed, and play them in the wild card round. Or if they do overtake Arizona when it's all said and done, because they have the tiebreaker. And by the way, they also have a tiebreaker over San Diego, which they're currently 2 games back in the loss column, but 2.5 overall. But for the Mets, how I look at it is that all they need to do is split these 4 games. Now, I would like 3 out of 4. I'm not going to get greedy for a sweep. 3 out of 4 would be nice as they close out their regular season homestand against the Phils. But if they split here, hopefully, with the Braves losing 1 game over the next 4, they will go to Atlanta at least with a 1-game lead heading into the final week. And obviously that series starting Tuesday in Atlanta to see where the wild card will fall, whether it be the 5th seed if Arizona continues to not play well. And now they go to Milwaukee for 4 games, which I get it. Milwaukee doesn't really have much to play for. Now, let me see when it comes to maybe getting a 2 seed. I think it's going to be between LA and the Phillies when it comes to the 1 and 2 seed. And right now, Phillies 1, where the Dodgers are 2. But let's see. Milwaukee right now, they are actually 3 games behind them. No, am I reading that correctly? No, they're 2 games behind them. I thought that was 86. 2 games behind the Dodgers. Could they make that up over the course of the next 10 days? They can. But as of right this second, they're going to be a 3 seed. But for the Mets, how I look at it is, and I talked about this on Monday, if they're a game up or tied even, and you wanted them to be a game up, at least, I would feel good going about that series in Atlanta. Now, the one thing that would scare you, and I get it, this is 2024, this is not 2022. The Mets going into that next to last series of the regular season 2 years ago, and they're going to have the same scenario this year. They were a game up for the NL East, and we saw what happened. Max Scherzer couldn't get a win, Jacob deGrom couldn't get a win, and Chris Bassett could not get a win, where the Mets were then 1 game back, and that was it. Actually, they were 2 games back because they got swept. They were 1 game up, they were tied, and then obviously lost the other 2 games to where they were 2 games back. And of course, the Mets did not win a division wild card scenario, and then they lost to the Padres, which I wouldn't mind if the Mets played the Padres in that regard. I get it, they got to fly out to the West Coast. Padres with their lineup and even with their bullpen. But I think there could be, with the baseball gods, a little payback if, and I say if, because it's not etched in stone, people. And I'm not trying to count my chickens before they hatch. But if the Mets would play the Padres, I'm one to say, I don't care who we play. Would it be better if they play the Brewers? Yes, but all right, let me shut up because I don't want to jinx it. But with that being said, let's see what the Mets can do over the weekend against the Phils. Maybe they can win 3 out of 4. They have Taijuan Walker, who's pitched terribly this year. Maybe they could get a good jump tonight with Luis Severino on the mound against the Phils. So we'll see what happens there. And as far as the Braves go, Braves have not played well. They blew a 5-1 lead to the Reds the other night and losing 6-5. They did win last night going away. But they'll conclude their series with an afternoon tilt in Cincinnati. So by the time 7:10 rolls around, first pitch between the Mets and Phils tonight, they will know the fate of the Braves in their game today. And it would certainly help if the Reds could eke out another win, because if that happens, at least going into tomorrow's games, the Mets would be at worst just 2 games up where the Braves go to Miami to play the Marlins. And the Marlins have been a little feisty here. I know they split the first 2 games against the Dodgers with their conclusion of the series there in Miami tonight. But I trust the Braves to at least win 2 out of 3, maybe even sweep the Marlins going into the weekend, where obviously the Mets have a tough task in facing the Phillies. And then as far as Arizona goes, they had the 4 games in Milwaukee. They're currently tied with the Mets there. And of course, when you look at the standings, the Mets have the 5th slot because of the tiebreaker. And Arizona, as we look at their schedule, because they're going to be a key factor here, knowing that the Braves are 2 games back, and with the Mets battling it out with the Diamondbacks, after these 4 games, and I know we'll reconvene there on Monday, but after these 4 games against the Diamondbacks, they will close out with homestands against the Giants, who they are literally on life support for their wildcard chances, and it could be eliminated by the time we get to Monday. And then they do play the Padres at home to close out the year. Now, the Padres, who knows? They may not have much to play for at that time. Maybe they'll probably do their best to try to knock out the Diamondbacks, depending on where they're at in the standings. But they do have some interesting games here, even with Milwaukee already just wrapped up everything, and maybe they have their eyes set on maybe getting a 2 seed in the National League when it comes to seeding goes, and having that bye where they'll just be able to set their rotation for division series. But right now, it looks like they're going to be just in that 3 slot where they'll host the 6th team out of the National League. And that's what you have with the baseball. There's nothing much I can even give you. I'm not going to give you the Cubs. I'm not going to give you other teams that are on the fringe or just kind of hanging around, or I should really say hanging on at this point, because like I said, this is the next to last weekend of the baseball season, and that's what I have. Let's see where it all shakes down. One more time, if the Mets split and the Braves get 3 out of 4 of these next 4 games, and then they'll have a respite there on Monday before the series begins on Tuesday. And let's see what happens. Now, as far as other things, news and notes, I know that the Yankees clinched there last night, and what a boneheaded play, and I get it. Julio Rodriguez had a bat flying out at him where Randy Arozarena was at the plate, and he struck out swinging to the point where Rodriguez had to duck out of the way of it. But not only did he duck out of the way, but he ended up going to where the third base coach was, and the third base coach's box. He might as well have been in the dugout at that point, to where heads up on the Yankees side, where Austin Wells threw to third, Jazz Chisholm tagged him out, and this was in extra innings to where they had first and third, nobody out, and that rally was terminated, to where Julio Rodriguez even said, I know I had the bat coming at me, but I thought the play was dead. What? Dead? How? You played baseball since you were what, maybe 5 years old? How could you think that play was dead? Well, anyway, Seattle, I hate to use that word, but their playoff chances are pretty much dead, and that play was indicative of it. So for the Yankees, they clinch, and now they're looking ahead at a possible 1 seed with the Guardians, just a game behind them for that. And the Yankees, I know, they are looking as if they're right now trying to close out the regular year on a high note, try to have that momentum going into October. I still don't trust them 100%. And I know that's dangerous for me to say as a Yankee hater, but I don't trust their rotation, and their bullpen I don't trust either. And I understand you can say that about a lot of bullpens and a lot of rotations, etc. But Garrett Cole, what has he really done? Cole has not been the same pitcher that we saw a year ago. Granted, he was on the shelf for the first 2.5 months of the year, but he hasn't really been dominant at any point since he's returned. And are you going to trust Carlos Rodon in a big spot? Let's say if Garrett Cole loses game 1 in the division series. Now you're going to have Rodon pitch game 2? Because you're not going to have him pitch on the road in game 3. He may implode on the mound. So with that, and then Clay Holmes, who continues to blow these games left and right, is he a guy that you're going to 1,000, not even, or you're going to even 50% trust that he's going to save the day and the Yankees bacon if they're going to try to take a 1-0 lead, or if they're down 2-1 in the series and they're up 4-3 in the 9th inning on the road? Do you really trust him to close out that game? I think not. So I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but as I close out the baseball segment, I think the Yankees are also very intriguing, considering now they have a cushion. Now they can kind of exhale a little bit and set their rotation up and get the rest, whatever. And yeah, we'll see what's going to happen there. And obviously more to come with that as we get close to the end of the season. And then you had a couple of weird instances where Jose Altuve got ejected the other night, which was nonsense. These umpires, for whatever reason, they get set off by the slightest of words or actions. And in this case with Altuve, and I get it, the umpire probably thought he was being shown up there. But come on, Altuve fouled the ball off his foot. You can't replay that. And all he did was just show the umpire that, hey, here's the red bruise that I got from fouling the ball off. It wasn't as if he was animated. It wasn't as if he was acting up or just out of line, but he just wanted to show the umpire that, hey, this is where I got hit, and he got tossed from the game. And as it was, the Astros won the game, and as we all know, the Astros are going to clinch, I'm sure, any day now as well. And the Astros are also intriguing, too, considering their start and obviously everything that I've detailed throughout the course of the summer. And let's see, can they get back to an ALCS and represent for what, the 8th straight year in the American League? Here's one thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to predict this right now. That if the Yankees do play the Astros, and let me think, if the Astros get the 3 seed, because they won't be able to get a 2 or a 1 at this point, they will play the Guardians in the in the division series. They will not play the Yankees. And even though I know the seeding is weird, but I believe 2 will play 3. But I will say that if the Yankees and the Astros play again for an ALCS, the Yankees are going to win. And they're just going to be due to beat the Astros. And I get it that their metal and their DNA and who knows, they may just crop and bubble to the top of the playoff cauldron to where they could probably, just by what they've done here over the last dozen plus years, or really half dozen plus years, that they may be able to find a way to beat the Yankees. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. Now, does that not mean that the Yankees won't get picked off beforehand? We'll have to wait and see who they're going to play. But I just wanted to throw that out there. Reverse jinx, you might say? But then you also have Shohei Ohtani, who got his 49th steal last night, and the night before hit his 48th home run. So let's see if he's going to achieve 50-50, which isn't a big deal, I guess, for history's sake, because it's never been done. But I know I talked about the Mickey Mantle quote in the past. I won't bring that up. But he is now 2 homers away and 1 stolen base away from achieving something that has never been done in the history of Major League Baseball. All right, now let me turn my attention, put on the helmet and shoulder pads to discuss what's happening in the National Football League. And you have a lot of injuries and a quarterback change in Carolina, but of course the schedule. And as a matter of fact, before I even get to that, let me put a pause real quick, because Major League Baseball schedule, and look at that. I almost got ahead of myself. We know who the games are and what the matchups are going to be over the weekend. We talked about Detroit, Baltimore, Minnesota, Boston, Seattle at Texas. I'm just throwing that in there just for the hell of it. Angels at Houston for the hell of it. San Francisco at Kansas City, because Kansas City's in that wild card mix. We know about Mets, Phillies. We know about Atlanta going to Miami. And the Diamondbacks, they are still in Milwaukee, as we know. All right, so that's it. On to the NFL. Back to the helmet and shoulder pads. I'll get to the injuries first. You have quite a few, especially if you're the Niners. We know about Christian McCaffrey. He's on the IR with that calf and Achilles. Well, you could also add Deebo Samuel to that. Not that he's on the IL, but he's going to be out a couple of weeks with a calf strain. So their offense is going to be compromised going into LA to play the Rams, who are 0-2. And as we all know, the Rams, they are certainly a mass unit at this point. You know, no Puka Nacua. He's on the IL. And now Cooper Kupp, who I don't believe is on the IL just yet, but is not going to play with his own injuries. So the Rams, just when you thought that things could get worse, well, now you're not going to have the former Super Bowl MVP in the lineup, and they're going to be able to, with Scotch tape and bubblegum, put together an offense for a one Matthew Stafford, and I guess you could say the same to a certain extent for Brock Purdy, although they do have weapons, Brandon Ayuk and even George Kittle. So you would think that the Niner contingent is going to come from the Bay Area down to Southern California to represent and invade SoFi this weekend to cheer their team on the victory after a loss last week in Minnesota. So we'll see what happens there. You also have Isaiah Pacheco. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks with a fibula injury. I believe it was a slight fracture, nothing too severe, but he's going to be out, where they bring in Kareem Hunt. Now, he's on the practice squad, and obviously they did their due diligence to make sure that Kareem and everything with him is 100%. Now, that episode in the Cleveland Hotel where you saw the footage there with the woman that he exchanged, I think it was a kick or whatever it was, obviously that's in his rearview mirror. And remember, he did play for the Cleveland Browns at the time when he was cut and got back in the league. Well, let's see if Kareem Hunt has any gas in the tank to contribute there to a Chief offense who, let's face it, other than a guy like Rashee Rice and even Travis Kelce, who only had one catch the other day for 5 yards, and we get it that he's going to be a guy that is only going to come up in these big games. He's a little bit long in the tooth. What is he, 34, 35 years of age? But now they do not have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, as we know. They don't have, of course, the running back and a one, Isaiah Pacheco. They are very thin there, as we know. I guess we have Juju Smith-Schuster as a guy that could be reliable, but is he going to be a guy that a lot of people, especially defensive coordinators, are going to be shaking in their boots to say, oh, we got to make sure to follow Juju Smith-Schuster wherever he goes? Absolutely not. So that's another addition for the Chiefs, but how much he's going to add in a one Kareem Hunt, that remains to be seen. And then you have the situation with Tua with the concussion. I think he'll come back. He's going to be on the IL for 4 weeks, as we know, as he tries to rehab and get himself back on the field. I know Antonio Pierce made a comment about, oh, if I was him, I'd retire. That's easy for him to say. Obviously, he was a longtime linebacker in the NFL, as we all know, Super Bowl champion with the Giants, head coach of the Raiders. But Tua, he just signed that big deal, and I get it. That's another big question mark and a big question for people to ask whether or not they should have signed him to that long-term deal, knowing about his concussion history. Well, obviously, last year he went unscathed through 17 games. So, unfortunately, he went in head first into Damar Hamlin, and there's your concussion. He's going to have to slide. I get he's trying to get the extra yard. I get he's trying to fight for whatever ground that he could possibly get on that gridiron. But yes, he's going to have to, whenever, as close as he may be to the first down marker, he has to be 100% sure that if he's going to go head first, that he's going to have to do it to the point where he's not going to make contact. He's going to have to slide, or if he does go head first, he's going to have to roll to a first down and not necessarily try to barrel into an opposing linebacker, lineman, or safety to try to get those extra yards, feet, or inches for that matter. So Tua on the shelf to where they bring in Tyler Huntley. Now we know the Dolphins, they're going to be, in all likelihood, a team that could be on the fringe, depending on how they do here. Now, they go to Seattle over the weekend or on Sunday. Now, is Tyler Huntley a guy? We know Skylar Thompson is going to be the quarterback, but Huntley, who has had some spells for one Lamar Jackson in the past, has been pretty good. He hasn't been a flop. He hasn't been a total failure. So at least he's a guy that can play the position, that he is a little bit competent. Dare I even say a Lamar Jackson light? Now, that's obviously a bit of a stretch, but he can scramble. He can move around a little bit. He's a small guy. He's not big by any stretch, but he's a guy that the Dolphins signed. They get him off the Raven practice squad. So who knows if he's going to be in competition with Skylar Thompson, who has had a couple of moments, in particular that playoff game against the Bills in the wild card a couple of years ago. So we'll see what's going to happen there. A.J. Brown, who did not play in the Monday night disaster against the Falcons, and I say disaster only because of the drop by Saquon Barkley, and I had no problem with the play call. It was a high percentage play. It was a safe play. Can Saquon Barkley catch the ball? Now, he caught a touchdown pass in Brazil. I don't know. Is he allergic to U.S. soil when it comes to catching passes, as he's had a ton of drops over the years? And he did put it on him, so you got to give it up. At least he was accountable and was forthright in his response when it came to the media. But for A.J. Brown, who has a hamstring injury, he's not going to participate this week as the Eagles try to get back on the beam. And again, we'll go through the schedule in a moment. But the other big story this week was the benching of a one Bryce Young. And you had a lot of people from all these different corners come out to say, is this the end of Bryce Young in Carolina? Can he regain his confidence? Is he lost now that after 18 games, he does not have the starting job? Does people have short memories here? Do people automatically think that because he's been pulled from the lineup, that his career now in the hands of Andy Dalton? It's not as if you got a guy many years ago, if you recall, when the Dallas Cowboys drafted Troy Aikman number 1. And in the supplemental draft, if you recall, they drafted the Miami quarterback in a one Steve Walsh. And a lot of people thought that there could have been a quarterback competition between Walsh and Aikman. Now, we know, not to go back in the time machine, but that was a year where they were 1-15. Troy Aikman was 0-11 as a starter, and a lot of people thought, can Aikman even play in the league where you have a guy with Steve Walsh who was capable and had ability, but we all know Steve Walsh did not have an NFL career, and Troy Aikman is in the Hall of Fame. Not to compare that to this, but here's a scenario where Dalton is on his last legs and will show some competency under center and knows his way around the league and around reading coverages and defenses and things of that nature. I think this is a good thing for the kid. To automatically all of a sudden think that his career is over, his career is in jeopardy, he's going to be gone from Carolina, does he have any trade value? What? Are you serious? Let me go back in the time machine one more time, and I get it, this was 50 years ago. But this is the best example that I could give you, especially when it surrounds another number one overall quarterback. Terry Bradshaw, number one, 1970. Where he led his team into the postseason. Obviously, 72 was part of the Immaculate Reception with Franco Harris. I don't need to run down that whole play in that scenario. But for Bradshaw, who led his team to the postseason, 72-73, and now the 74 season, where Joe Gilliam, the backup, who played very well in the preseason, to the point where Chuck Noll benched Terry Bradshaw. A guy who took his team to the postseason in 2 years. A guy who was the number one overall pick. A guy that was supposed to be the savior for a Steeler franchise that up until 1970 was literally football Siberia. Look it up. And then now you have a situation where Gilliam is your starting quarterback and Bradshaw's on the bench, but then Noll comes to his senses, Bradshaw gets reinserted, and it's ironic because that 74 season, what happens? They go and win the Super Bowl. Not predicated on their offense because we all know it's about their defense. Mean Joe Green, Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, Mel Blount. Do I need to go down through the list of Hall of Famers? Absolutely not. I went through half of them. But for Bradshaw to get his job back, and then we all know what happened from that point on. Why can't this happen for Bryce Young? That's not to say he's going to have a career like Terry Bradshaw. That I will certainly not even pump the brakes. I'll come to a screeching halt. But to say that his tenure in Carolina is kaput, to say that his trade value, what can you do? You can't even trade him. Can you give the kid a little bit of a break? I'm sure if Andy Dalton gets hurt or plays even worse, and you can't even imagine him playing worse than Bryce Young, but let's say if that's the case, you're going to bring the kid back. Let him take his lumps, and you can even argue whether or not they should take him out now. I understand. Their offense is putrid. Their offense is abominable. They put up 13 points in the first 2 weeks of this NFL season. And Bryce Young is looking like a deer in headlights. All right. Does Andy Dalton, with his resume, being a solid quarterback throughout the course of his career and even a Pro Bowl quarterback going back to his days at the Bengals, is he a guy that's probably better suited to lead this team and maybe win a game or two? That I'll give you. But we all know Andy Dalton is not going to be long for this franchise and certainly not the future of this team. It is Bryce Young. But I would think before it's all said and done, as we get to the end of the year, unless miraculously Dalton rips off 5 straight wins and they're 5-2 in the thick of the NFC South, I would think Bryce Young's going to get his job back before it's all said and done. So for everybody that's going crazy, and I get it, clickbait is trickbait. Oh, he's done. Oh, he's already a bust. Oh, is he one of the top busts of all time? The guy's played 18 games. Jamarcus Russell, he is not. So let's just put a rest to that as I move it along. And as far as the schedule goes, kicks off tonight, New England at New York, and we know that the Patriots have had the Jets number over the years. I get it that the Jets won that final game last year, the regular season, but we all know it has been an absolute nightmare for this Jet team to play the Patriots. If there's any silver lining when you go into this game tonight, is that the coach on the other sideline is not Bill Belichick. It is Gerard Mayo. And that's not a knock on Mayo. He's only had 2 games. I'm not going to eviscerate him because he's not Bill Belichick. But again, you're not going to see the hoodie and the cut-off sleeves on the sideline there where we would normally see Belichick leading his team, usually to victory on the MetLife sidelines. And of course, the other storyline is Aaron Rodgers playing 2 games, home opener. I'm sure the Jet fan, they're going to hold their bated breath to make sure they get past the 4th play of their offensive series, whether it's in the opening series or if they go 3 and out on the next series. We'll have to wait and see, but I would think for the Jet fan, my prayers are up for you that Rodgers will make it through the game all right And Rodgers, I'm sure he's chomping at the bit, ready for this game. That's going to be a raucous crowd. I know it's unfair for them to have their home opener on a Thursday night. I think that's terrible. It should have been Sunday at 1. But anyway, the Jets will kick off the Week 3 schedule, and I think they'll win tonight. And I'm sure they're going to be flying high, ready to go to put it on New England, now knowing that Belichick's not there, and maybe this is the start of a new regime where the Jets will now just dominate New England. Your games this weekend, the two that stick out, and I get it, you have some high alert games from the standpoint of Baltimore at Dallas at 425. Dallas, can they go 1-2, especially after the embarrassment at home against the Saints last week, which we all know the Cowboys had won 16 straight home games prior to that, and that's not including the playoff game against Green Bay. But can they get back on the beam? And then Baltimore 0-2, can they actually start off 0-3? Ooh, I don't know about that, but that's a game that I know is going to pique a lot of people's interest, that being the 425 game come Sunday afternoon. Then you also have another game, which I know doesn't really jump out at the page, but with New Orleans at 2-0 and Philly at 1-1 after the way that game unfolded, can the Saints go 3-0, or can the Eagles get their bearings back to go 2-1 and give the Saints their first loss of the year? So that's intriguing from that standpoint. And you have 2 Monday night games, which I'll get to. But the 2 games that to me are pretty intriguing, and right, they're not 5-star marquee matchups where you're going to run to the set to watch. But the 2 games that I look at that, one of these 2 teams could be 3-0 when it's all said and done. The first one being Houston at Minnesota. Now, Houston, a lot of people expected them to have a big year considering what they did last year, and off to the start that a lot of people have expected. Whereas Minnesota, all right, they beat the Giants on the road, opening game. All right, fine, no problem. The Giants are a mess. But then, wait, what? They beat San Francisco at home? And not to say they did it easy, but obviously had a lead, and the Niners had to come back to it. They won 23-17. Can they continue their winning ways? Can they go 3-0 to start off their year, where a lot of people thought this was going to be Detroit's division to lose? So that is one where, okay, not a sexy matchup, but someone is going to come out 3-0. And then the other game is the Chargers in Pittsburgh, where the Chargers have stayed on the East Coast all week. I'm sure they'll travel to Pittsburgh at some point, if not tomorrow, maybe Saturday, as they've stayed in the Eastern time zone. Let's see if that's going to be a factor for them. And with Justin Herbert nursing a bit of a leg injury, I believe an ankle, that's going to be on big-time notice to see how that's going to compromise him. We understand he's not a guy that's going to roll out or try to gain first downs with his legs if the play breaks down, but that's one we're going to have to keep an eye on, especially with that Pittsburgh pass rush with TJ Watt and Alonzo Highsmith and Cameron Hayward. So let's see if one of those 2 teams can come out 3-0, and that would be interesting, because then if that's the case for the Chargers, they will still be neck and neck with the Chiefs, who have the Sunday night game against Atlanta, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But for the Steelers, who are 2-0, and maybe they could put some more distance in the division, let's say if Baltimore does not come out of Dallas alive, as they could be staring at 0-3. And then the Bengals have a Monday night game against Washington, which you would think they will be the cure-all for their early season ills. But Steelers could go up 3-0, and this is their home opener to boot. So that's another intriguing matchup. And can the Steelers score more than 14, 17, even 20 points for that matter? Knowing that the Chargers, although they don't have a loaded offense as they did in the past with the likes of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, but can they get off and running with their quarterback and make some key plays in key moments to continue their winning ways? So I think that that's a very interesting game. But besides that, not a lot to really chew on. Giants in Cleveland, Green Bay at Tennessee, Malik Willis coming back to his organization that he was drafted by, so let's see how that shakes down. And can Will Levis not make any boneheaded plays for the Titans? Denver at Tampa. I know Tampa's 2-0. They could go 3-0 after the game on Sunday. Carolina at Vegas. Miami at Seattle. San Francisco at LA, as we talked about. Detroit at Arizona. All right, Arizona's been feisty. Could they hang a loss on the lines for them to go 1-2? Kansas City at Atlanta. Atlanta was a huge win for them. I understand even with the Eagle defense, they fell apart as Kirk Cousins was 6 of 7, went down the field, got the touchdown there to Drake London to get a much-needed win with this matchup against the defending 2-0 Super Bowl champs. And then Monday night, you have two games, which I don't like, as I've said, ad nauseum and infinitum. But you have Jacksonville going to Buffalo. That is a 7:30 start, ESPN. And then Buck and Aikman will be in Cincinnati, where the Redskins and Jaden Daniels will be in the Queen City to go up against Joe Burrow and company. And let's see if Burrow will right the ship to get themselves back in the win column and see if they can maybe even inch closer in the division, barring what happens there with Pittsburgh against the Chargers there on Sunday. But that is your NFL Week 3. That is your headlines. And one last thing before I move it along. The announcement was made for the 2025 Hall of Fame class, including 16 first-timers. Those first-timers are headlined by none other than Eli Manning, Luke Kuechly, Terrell Suggs, and Adam Vinatieri. Now, you have another set of first-timers, Joe Staley, the one-time lineman, Ryan Khalil, the long-time lineman as well, Earl Thomas, the former safety, Legion of Doom with the Seahawks, Vernon Davis, the tight end there, most notably with San Francisco, Marshawn Lynch, as we all know, Travis Frederick, the lineman there from the Cowboys. Eli, you got to wonder, I think he's going to get in. Is he going to be a first-time ballot? That's going to be the big question. And this is not going to be announced until the Friday or Saturday before the Super Bowl. These are the guys that are on the, not fence, but on the ballot for the first time. Eli's going to eventually get in, no doubt, because of what he did winning those two Super Bowls against Brady. But he's a 500 quarterback regular season, and he's 8-5, I think, in the postseason overall. But he has those two Super Bowl wins, the two Super Bowl MVPs. And when you're in that pantheon with the likes of Joe Montana, Terry Bradshaw, Bart Starr, and Tom Brady, how can he not be a Hall of Famer? But the question is he going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer? In my eyes, he is not. But he is a Hall of Fame player, and we'll see what happens there. Adam Vinatieri, he's a lock. He's going in. Terrell Suggs won a Defensive Player of the Year, was a dominant force. Ask Ben Roethlisberger whether or not Terrell Suggs should be a Hall of Famer. I think he is. Is he a first ballot? I'd say he's not, but I would say he is a Hall of Famer. And Luke Kuechly, who retired early, as we know, I believe he had 5 all-team NFL first-team All-Pros. If you have 4 or even 5 for that matter, you should be a Hall of Famer. Granted that his career was cut short with concussions and things of that nature. But to me, Marshawn Lynch and the Vernon Davises and the Travis Fredericks, good players, and they were all pros, but you have to be multiple all pros. And I know Earl Thomas was very good, but his end of his career just nosedived. But just with the 4 that I mentioned, Suggs, Vinatieri, Manning, and Kuechly, I wanted to highlight them first and foremost because those are the guys I think are going to be closer to get a Hall of Fame nod than the aforementioned Marshawn, Earl Thomas, etc. So that's what I have there with college football. Think about this. They're already a third after this weekend into their schedule. And the only games of note that I have here, the big one is Tennessee at Oklahoma. Tennessee ranks 6th, as we know. And whether or not they're going to be able to go to Oklahoma and pull off an upset on the road. Now, Oklahoma, this is not the Oklahoma of yesteryear. They've had their moments, and they are a team that could be in the running for the college football playoff. I would say Tennessee prevails, maybe by a nose, be a close game. I think it's either going to be close Tennessee or Oklahoma just blows them out. And when I say blow them out, it's not going to be 49-17, but 38-24, somewhere in that vicinity. Then you have Utah going to Oklahoma State. Utah, who beat up on the Aggies there. No, not Texas A&M, but Utah State. They have to go on the road again to see whether or not that they belong in that discussion too. They're currently ranked 12th in the nation. So that's a game to pay attention to. And USC, Michigan, I get it that and they already changed their quarterbacks there, so that's all you need to know. Trying to save their season, so to speak, where the head coach, Sharon Moore, you know that he's got to be scrambling, knowing that they do not want to fall out of the top 25 and be an afterthought for the remainder of this year. They have USC coming into their building, and of course SC ranked 11th, right ahead of Utah as far as maybe when we take the big picture view of college football, they're going to be one of those teams trying to fight for one of those final playoff spots. So USC, Michigan, again, could Michigan somehow, some way muster up enough to beat the Trojans and be a team that could be part of this playoff discussion? that we'll have to wait and see. But remember, they got blasted by Texas, and we understand Texas, they could be a championship team when it's all said and done. So those are the only 3 games of note, if you ask me. Now, Notre Dame has lost a couple of offensive linemen. Just keep that in mind as you get deeper into the season. Out for the year, Ashton Craig and also Jordan Botelho, excuse me. So if they face a team that has any pass rush, that's going to be a factor when it comes to Notre Dame as they try to just keep their season afloat just with the one loss, as we know, with Northern Illinois. Now as I lace up my skates to go around the National Hockey League, and this will conclude it here because the NBA, their training camps aren't going to start for another week or so, and then also the Celtics and Nuggets will start theirs on Tuesday because they'll be in, I believe they'll be in Abu Dhabi, yes, because they're going to have a couple of exhibition games thereafter as far as their early training camps and exhibition season goes. So we'll put a pause on the NBA for now. But the National Hockey League training camps throughout the country and even North America for that matter have begun. And you had a couple of signings. I know the Red Wings signed their young forward Lucas Raymond, 8 years, $64 million. Obviously, that's going to come out to $8 million plus a year. But the Pittsburgh Penguins, their longtime captain, Sidney Crosby, 2 years at $17.4 million. And if you divide it, it's $8.7 million. I didn't know that his contracts that were negotiated were going to be of his annual income, his number. Because if you recall, he does wear number 87, and he was born on August 7th. So that's why the number is very important, and of course relative to not only his birth date, but the year he was born, the number that he wears, and the agreement to how much he makes annually, because his current contract, he was making $8.7 million, and now he signs this extension, which I thought was pretty cool, and was unbeknownst to me until I found out the other day. But here's the thing. I'm sure he's in great shape. And we all know that he is a top, off the top of my head, he's probably a top 20 player of all time. You'd have to say that. And we could go through the list and we could go through all the players, and that's going to be tough to fit in because we all know the NHL has a long and deep history and has a lot of great players. But Crosby's up there. You got to give it to him. And not only just with the Cups and the MVPs, but his longevity. I believe he's going into, he was drafted, I think 04, 05. So this is going to be his 21st year in Pittsburgh, same team too. So I don't know with Pittsburgh. They have not made the playoffs the last couple of years. Actually, they didn't make it last year. They made it. No, they didn't even make it the year before because they collapsed in that final game in Chicago at home in order for the Islanders to then make it to the postseason. So they have not made it to the playoffs. And we know that their pedigree between Chris Letang, the defenseman, as well as Evgeny Malkin, his running mate there at winger, those guys have a lot of mileage. Yes, a lot of experience, a lot of know-how, and know what it takes to win. But to me, this is the back nine and pretty much the 17th and 18th holes for these guys, and in particular Crosby, to see if they could have any last-ditch effort to have one last playoff run in front of them. If you ask me, I thought so maybe 2 years ago, but forget about it. And now that I say forget about it, watch them be at the top of the standings for most of the year. And next thing you know, they're going to be in a conference final. And how would you bet against Crosby and Malkin if that's going to be the case? But for Crosby, we know about the career he's had. He signed 2 more years. Let's see if they're going to have any relevancy, any length when it comes to not only having success in the regular season, but parlaying that into the postseason for maybe Crosby to have one last run before it's all said and done. But the NHL, back in our consciousness, I know it's just training camp and exhibition games. We're not going to pay attention to that. But the season does begin on the 4th with the game overseas between the Devils and the Sabres. But then the season in earnest will begin, I believe, on the 8th, that first Tuesday, or second Tuesday of October, because the first will be on that Tuesday. So National Hockey League not too far behind as we start to turn the page. Sunday, the autumn equinox begins, which means the days of summer are now literally down to its precious few. So before you know it, the leaves will start to change. The Air will be a lot more crisper depending on where you live. And of course, me in the Northeast, you know it's going to start getting crisper. And obviously, the short sleeves and the shorts are going to be put away in light of the hoodies, sweatshirts, jeans, jackets, boots, etc. as we say goodbye to my favorite season of the year in summer. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode in the books, or just about. Thank you so much for stopping by, for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is that I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review on whichever podcast platform you listen to, Apple, Spotify, the website, JAYREELZ.com, my YouTube channel, @JAYREELZ, where you can watch the video portion of the podcast and even also get it on Spotify as well. Please, people, do your part. If you could go ahead, throw me a few stars, write a review. I would greatly appreciate it. It's going to go a long way, like I mentioned at the top, as far as increasing the visibility of this podcast. As you all know, I'm an independent, one-man band, full-time content creator, just trying to carve and blaze my own path here in this space to where I could start gaining some income. So with your help, people, and I'm going to need it, I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate that. If you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, you can do so at the following: on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, Twitter, X, JAYREELZ1, just a number, the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast @gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA since birth. Talking sports is my bread and butter. Doesn't matter what time, what place. Wake me up in the middle of the night, I'll be there. Because you know I will deliver nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.